Sports are something that have bonded humanity together since the dawn of time. From the Olympians in ancient Greece to the modern spectacle of tennis, talking about sports, discussing statistics and data, engaging in parasocial relationship with athletes, and enjoying a good hate watch are all things that humans have formed communities from, whether it's in real life or the digital realm. While the majority of sports discussion is male-centric, since it is a predominantly male-dominated field, there has been a surge in recent years about creating safe spaces for women who are fond of sports, which is something that makes a lot of sense to me, since a lot of male-dominated sports communities tend to be hostile to female fans. However, the tide has shifted towards a corporate engineered fantasy that does no good to either female sports fans or female athletes, and that is the rise of WAG culture and sports that are monopolized by men. If you've been around long enough on this channel, you will likely know this is a remake of my old video on WAG culture, but much more nuanced and less reactionary. So, I'll give you a small throwback. I don't know about you, but I personally love being a female sports fan. I love getting called a glory hunter when I wear my team's kit in public. I love being asked extremely niche and stupid questions by random men who can't possibly fathom that a woman would be into sports. I love being called a pick-me and try-hard by female center bros who think all women should be unidimensional and stick to a predetermined mold of womanhood. I love when people call me a fangirl who only watches sports because she thinks the athletes are hot. I love being told that I'm ruining the sport because I'm simply existing in that space as a woman. I love being told that a male athlete will never give me a chance. Jokes aside, I do deeply enjoy being a sports fan. While it has certainly been a bumpy ride and I have encountered my fair share of misogyny and sexism, I have found a community that I adore, as well as close friends and family that I share this interest with. Not only by going through data and analyzing performance, which is one of the things that I personally enjoy the most, but also because digging deep into sports has broadened my knowledge about culture and social dynamics. I've always liked to look at society and the issues we face through the lens of my interests and start conversations from there. In my opinion, it's a great way of bonding and creating community while still managing to have meaningful discussions. I've been watching football and motorsports for quite a long time now. I'm actually old enough to remember Messi's first official match for Barcelona against Espanyol. My relationship to sports has evolved as I've grown up and started to understand and notice a lot of things around me. In the last few years, I also started to watch women's sports, but in the midst of my enjoyment lies a concern about the way sports are marketed to women and especially to young girls. Not as spaces they can occupy in the same way as men do, not as something they can discuss, talk about and not have their intelligence questioned, but as an aspirational fantasy of trading your identity and shielding beneath the looming shadow of a man in exchange for visibility, clout, and the acceptance of being a side character in his narrative while your own sense of self is flattened and erased. And before we deconstruct this machine, of course, I will be giving you the theories and concepts we will be using to break it down, which will be linked down below in the description box for you to read, as always. First of all, Erotic Capital by Catherine Hakim, which was built upon Pierre Bourdieu's concepts of economic, social, and cultural capitals. Because the women that usually hold the title of WAGs are conventionally attractive, physically fit, and are influencers or models, they have access to a special kind of social mobility because their attractiveness grants them access to other forms of capital by their connection to a famous male athlete, including lucrative bank partnerships, magazine covers, and other forms of public attentions, which also happens by conforming to stereotypically feminine standards of beauty and the maintenance of their appearance. Second, and I know some people are gonna get really rattled about this one, gender essentialism or bioessentialism. This refers to the idea that traditional gender roles and power imbalances are the direct cause of evolutionary biology rather than socialization and continued perpetuation of oppressive systems by teaching and nurturing. This applies to both the WAGs and the athletes, which, by gender essentialism, are flattened into concepts and stereotypes that strip them of their own individuality. The WAG is flattened as a secondary character into the athlete's life, while having no narrative of her own and attached to the label of gold digger and trophy wife, while the male is flattened as a highly superficial, sex-crazed being that is unable to control himself and lacks the ability to form intelligent thoughts, which has undertones of classism and opens the way for fans to strip him of accountability and infantilize him when he makes mistakes. Third, Affective Economies by Sarah Ahmed and Emotional Capitalism by Eva Liu. These two frameworks go hand in hand because as the media companies behind the sports themselves push the figure of the WAG to profit off of young female audiences, the general public and those who are viewers of the sport start treating everything she does as a product to be consumed. Her loyalty, her joy, her sadness, her struggle, her pleasure, and her grief are all potential forms of capital to be exploited, while simultaneously they get stripped of their humanity by means of either deification or shaming. Hate and love accumulate about WAG figures in the same ways it does around other celebrity targets. These emotions are not a byproduct of behavior. They are socially and economically productive and used to build communities and generate identity, either by idolizing the WAGs or by constructing spaces and safe places to hate on them. And the last one is something that I like to call the public and private woman shame binary, which is something I conceptualized from both Carol Bateman's sexual contract theory and Sigmund Freud's Madonna horror complex, which is how I define the cultural logic that simultaneously demands female visibility for the WAGs to be present at the sporting events, always look beautiful and put together, and appear to be supportive of her partner in a very public way, but at the same time punishes women for too much of the same visibility they demand of them, in which the publicity becomes evidence of attention-seeking behaviors, hints and clues, manipulations, or distraction from the male athletes, putting the WAGs in a situation in which they simply can't win. WAG culture is not exactly a novelty, though it has definitely evolved. Public interest in the partners of professional athletes has risen with advancements in social media, but the concept itself is nothing new and has existed for a long time, even since the 1950s. Let's do some quick history reading. The term itself, which stands for wives and girlfriends, has debatable origins. Some said it came from a book, while others believe it was created in the early 2000s. However, the use of the term as we know it today and some of the negative implications it has was popularized by the British tabloids during their coverage of the 2006 FIFA World Cup in Germany, more specifically when they ignored the sports aspect of it and instead covered Victoria Beckham, Cheryl Cole, and other WAGs of the England national team. Considering how badly the men were doing, fair enough. While at that moment it was just a tabloid doing tabloid activities, the kind of coverage they received and the way they were glamorized set the tone for the rise of WAG culture we see today as a way of luring women into watching sports. And I say this because modern WAG culture highly relies on the WAGs being marketable to female audiences, especially young girls. Teenagers and young adult women on social media are the main quote-unquote culprits of perpetuating WAG culture because being a WAG is sold to them as an aspirational fantasy, as a life goal. You have fame, wealth, a loving partner, new opportunities, mainstream recognition, admirers. You can build a career from it. You have a safety net. You get the fabulous opportunity of being named his lucky charm, the one who saw him rise to the top, the one who held him down when things got tough, and the one who built with him, which appeals to a socialized desire for romance and having a partner. One of the many bones I have to pick with this lies, once again, in the aspirational fantasies they sell, which is definitely helped to be pushed by the media companies behind the sports themselves because it makes them money from young female audiences and gives them opportunities for brand collaborations. Formula One fans know how irritating it is to have the WAGs shown on the race broadcast, as well as seeing them posted everywhere on socials. WAGs of other sports are not different, with football clubs and NFL and NBA teams often including the partners of the athletes in their marketing. This isn't just an organic internet trend anymore. It is a calculated corporate pipeline that takes a human identity, turns it into a passive consumer object, and uses it to open up brand collaborations and tap into young female capital while threatening the freedoms women work hard for and our relation to man in modern society. Corporations getting their grubby hands on anything that they can profit for is already grating enough as it is, but it turns out even more insidious and dangerous when it's something that's heavily targeting young girls whose brains are still developing and are heavily susceptible to being influenced and trapped into something that's extremely harmful. The girl boss feminism of the early 2010s gave us a lot. Included in that a lot was the elimination of the binary between hyperfemininity and taking on career paths and jobs that were dominated by men, and demanded that women in these fields reject a stereotypical femininity to be taken seriously. That's why a lot of us had pygmy and tomboy faces where we tried to be one of the guys, and rejected things like dresses, makeup, and hairstyles that would have made us stand out as feminine women. Girl boss feminism brought a refreshing challenge to that perspective, even if it ended up not biting us in the ass. Nibbling us in the ass, it's more suited to this. It allowed you to say, hey, I own my own business, I know how to code, I have brain cells, and I can wear pink clothes, do a cut crease in my makeup, and dye my hair. Groundbreaking. Who could have possibly thought of that? Actually, I think I can blame Legally Blonde for this. And for a while, that lack of binary seemed to work. More quote-unquote girly businesses began to pop up, Women in male-dominated fields were no longer pressured to adhere to a certain mold in order to command respect, and shopping from female-owned enterprises was prioritized as a form of solidarity. And then came the COVID-19 pandemic that forced us to lock ourselves at home and strip the glamorous mask. The pandemic and its aftermath have been a time of economic insecurity. I mentioned in my plastic surgery video that when the economy gets rough, people tend to cut back on lavish spending, especially in their appearance, and seek a more basic approach in order to not stand out. With that approach came the clean girl aesthetic and other styles that have conservative undertones. These kinds of aesthetic, polished, classy, but not in a way they completely stand out, are like an open fridge full of what you take to a corporation to be able to market women in the sports. Just as this lovely and stylish young woman here. Her name is Alexandra Leclerc, and besides being an art major, influencer, and model, she is almost exclusively known for being the wife of Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc, who is one of the most popular figures in Formula 1. Alex started dating Charles back in 2023 and made some appearances at the races, including at his home race in Monaco. Her Instagram account was initially private, with a little over 500 followers. She made it public sometime in the beginning of 2024 to start capitalizing on her growing popularity when she started attending more and more races wearing some, and I must say, very cunty and stylish outfits that she got a lot of recognition for. She became the Formula 1 it girl. She was on Pinterest boards. Her profile photo was copied a lot. She was garnering attention from brands. Liberty Media, an US-based conglomerate that currently owns the rights of the Formula 1 brand, immediately saw the potential to generate revenue off of her and got to work. They started showing her and other WAGs on the race broadcast, sometimes to the annoyance of a lot of fans who want to see actual racing battles. They started including them in F1 social media posts and even in "This is a slur for F1 fans," an original Netflix docuseries that premiered in 2019 and follows Formula 1 and the lives of the drivers and the rest of the staff. Alexandra is not the only one that has benefited from the rise of WAG culture. Other partners of F1 drivers like Ika Gomez, Flavie Barla, and Rebecca Donaldson have been able to build careers in influencing and modeling by simply being associated with drivers. Happens in other sports too. Tulami Benson, fiancée of Arsenal winger Bukayo Saka, Brittany Mahomes, wife of Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes, amongst many others, all have built careers when the machines behind the sport realized that they were a good way to attract women to the sports business and profit off of them. While I'm certain that these women still hold autonomy in their personal lives, we see them as personas that are marketed with a very specific purpose. As you can already tell, I have a lot of beef with WAG culture, but the biggest issue I see with it, and the one that concerns me the most because of how archaic it is that this culture is riddled with bioessentialism. Like I mentioned before, bioessentialism or gender essentialism refers to the idea that traditional gender roles are the result of evolutionary biology rather than socialization and continued perpetuation of oppressive systems by teaching, observing, and nurturing. You can see it in the way that both the athlete and the WAG are positioned. The man is expected to be the provider, give his partner luxuries, make very public romantic gestures, and take the lead in the relationship, while the woman has to be content with simply sitting back, enjoying anything that her partner gives her, take his indiscretions on the chin because she's benefiting from him, and not make herself too much of a bother. And I wanted to use the example of defending Formula 1 world champion Lando Norris and his ex-girlfriend Maggie Coursera to illustrate the next point, and one of the things that I absolutely hate the most about WAG culture, or maybe more of a consequence of it and the bioessentialist narratives that surround it, which is the demonization of the women while the male athletes get infantilized and stripped of all their agency and power in their relationships. Think of this as a twisted version of the girls rule, boys rule saying. There's no better example than these two. Yes, this woman has said and done some quite nasty stuff, and I believe it's valid to discuss this and critique her for it in a nuanced way. But Lando's fans don't have the same energy for him. They have a lot of smoke for Maggie for her problematic behavior, but they consistently make excuses for Lando's past misogynistic statements, openly praising Trump unprovoked, being an abuse apologist, cultural appropriation and insensitivity, amongst other things. They consistently baby girl him, saying he was young and has changed. And I agree with the sentiment. People can learn from past behavior, reflect, and change. We should be encouraging others to take accountability so they can evolve to be better humans. And I'm sure Lando has matured and learned from that. But why don't you have this energy for Maggie? Why does he get to grow and change and be a better while she's just evil and permanently defined by the things she said when she was a teenager? It's just a question. And this is truly agitating to me, how fans always bend at every angle to defend the men while hating on their girlfriends. To them, they're just innocent victims that are stuck in PR relationship with these gold diggers who only want to use them for their fame, while all they want to do is be good at their sport. Like, yes girl, go off. Please tell me all about how these grown-ass privileged rich men are actually bastions of morality, while their girlfriends are conniving evil witches that are in cahoots with their publicists to trap these athletes in soul-sucking PR relationships for money and fame. Another consequence of WAG culture that I also hate is blaming the WAGs whenever the athletes underperform or whenever their team loses. This has been perpetuated for a long time, even by the male athletes themselves. During the 2001-2002 football season, the then captain of the English football club Manchester United, Roy Keane, lashed out at his teammates for being lazy and implied that their partners were the reason behind their lack of hunger for winning, as Manchester United ended the season trophyless. King has consistently doubled down his sentiment, including again in 2007 when he was managing Sunderland, claiming that football players had gone weak, and it was their partners who dictated their lives, wanting to stay in football clubs based in London for a luxury lifestyle. And I think that is often overlooked when discussing WAG culture and relationships in general is positioning men as primitive, sex-crazed beasts that simply cannot control themselves. This is what I consider the most dangerous thing about bioessentialism, because deeming men as inherently aggressive and incapable of change strips them of accountability and agency, and therefore deemed as something unavoidable, which is how things like rape culture and victim blaming happen. It's the intellectualized version of boys will be boys, and it also concerns me because it leads to the hypersexualization of young boys. I want to talk about a situation that happened somewhat recently in football to illustrate this, because it also made me realize how the desire to just be misogynistic will make men lose sight of something that's an actual issue in order to hate on a woman for the sake of it. Sometime in July or August of last year, Barcelona player Lamine Yamal, who was then a minor, started dating then 25-year-old Argentine singer and rapper Nicki Nicole in what was a highly publicized and short-lived relationship. They were spotted together in places like Monaco, the airport, at the training center when she dropped him off, posted about each other on their social media, and she attended Barcelona games. This relationship was weird from the beginning, and it's truly baffling to me how little people initially seemed to care about the age gap and how much of a red flag it was. This woman was already singing about drugs and sex while he was in middle school. The age of consent in Spain is 16, so technically messing around while he was a minor is not illegal because he was 17, but it's still gross. The mental age gap was already enough for me to side-eye her, especially since Lamine already has a history of being preyed upon by older women. And if you can believe it, a lot of male fans initially clap and cheer for this weird-ass relationship. They were so happy Lamine backed the baddie that he was making grown man moves. That was until he, alongside the team as a whole, started underperforming. There was a major injury crisis in Barcelona at the beginning of the season. Lamine himself got injured and had to be sidelined as he was diagnosed with pubalgia, which is an injury on the pubis and the lower abdomen. Due to the pelvic mobility that's used in dribbling, this is a problem mostly faced by wingers. Football legend Lionel Messi himself spoke at length about having suffered with pubalgia and how he struggled to recover from it. But male fans were very quick to blame Nicki Nicole for Lamine's sudden drop-off in form, because of course she's the only recent addition to his life. They heard that it's an injury of the pelvis and immediately thought, oh, it's a dick injury, they're fucking way too much, she's ruining him. Sure, let's blame the woman for ruining him instead of realizing that he's still very young and that his body is still growing and developing. Never mind the two male coaches who also don't give a fuck about that and make him a starter in every single game without giving him any rest, and the fact that there were a lot of crucial injuries in the team that contributed to an overall bad performance. And this would be hilarious if it wasn't so infuriating, because I do have a problem with Nicki Nicole and so should this man. Not because she ruined Lamine with her high sex drive, but because this woman is a fucking predator in her mid-20s messing around with a teenager. Like, girl, are you not embarrassed? And the reason I'm pointing this out is because male fans could have actually done something good here by calling out this woman for being a groomer and recognizing predatory patterns and how often young boys, and especially young black boys, are sidelining from these conversations, but no, they instantly went for cheap misogynistic shots. I already talked at length about the gender stereotypes surrounding WAG culture and how they offer some benefit, if you can even call it that. Because yes, you get a lot of social credit by being a WAG, but you also get a lot of unjust hate, most of which is greatly rooted in misogyny. Going back to Alexandra Leclerc, she's hugely popular, with millions of followers across her social media accounts. She's gone viral several times for her outfits, for her photos with her boyfriends, for her dog, But not everything is sugar spice and everything nice. She also gets a lot of vitriol from Charles's own delusional fans because they want to be in her place, they want access to the same opportunities she has, they want to hold her accountable for things she said in the past, or male fans who consistently mock her for being a trophy wife and a glorified dog sitter, or simply don't want her anywhere near the sport. And I don't want you to take this as me perpetuating hate on the WAGs. Quite the opposite. I'm mostly critiquing the aspirational culture that is built around being a WAG, of the overarching sentiment it promotes that a traditional heterosexual relationship is the standard and should be celebrated the most above other sorts of personal accomplishments, that entering a relationship with a famous male athlete is good for you, it's something that you should aspire to, that it will bring you a career, fame, a safety net. And I'm not gonna say this is entirely false, but people with underlying motives won't tell you about the negative aspects of being a WAG, of the hate, of the stalking, the very tangible dangers you face, which, to be fair, applies to most heterosexual relationships in general, but it's the way they package it as a perfect fairy tale that raises alarms within me. The promotion and glorification of a traditional couple and a family unit that ultimately undoes the decades of progress that has been made and leads to shaming and ostracization of women who choose their careers, their creative pursuits, a charitable life, or who seek out other non-romantic forms of human connection over a traditional relationship, being married and having children. And if you're still not convinced that WAG culture is a negative thing, let this young and lovely lady show you. This is Laila Hasanovic, a Danish model and influencer of Bosnian descent. She is currently in a relationship with tennis player Jannik Sinner and previously dated Danish football player Jonas Wind and former Formula 1 driver Mick Schumacher. Laila is despised by a great deal of sports fans. A slut is the probably most tame insult that's gotten directed at her. She's hated all across the spectrum, either by jealous and catty female fans or by misogynistic male fans who says she ruins all the athletes she comes into contact with. Keep in mind, outside of her dating sportsmen, which is not a crime, Laila really hasn't done anything wrong. She has a relatively clean track record, just doing her job as a model and influencer, minding her business and living her life. And I'm emphasizing this because a lot of young girls and especially teenagers don't know the hell that is dating a professional athlete or a famous man in general. They think it's all glitz and glamour. This is your reminder to not glorify these relationships. With famous people, there are a number of things involved that may make interpersonal relationships difficult. You might find out that you actually hate being in a relationship like this. Professional athletes travel a lot. Formula 1 drivers in particular are on the road for about 90% of the year. They likely won't hamper you and you won't see them often unless you abandon your own identity to follow them around. You will get a lot of nasty comments on your social media. You might get followed around or stalked. And even if you break up, the internet remembers, and a part of your identity will be forever tied to your previous relationship. Privacy is off the table, obviously. Even if you choose to not be a public figure, your life will still be dissected. You no longer have a choice. Lily Snyder, the girlfriend of McLaren Formula 1 driver Oscar Piastri, is not what you could call a public figure. She's not a mother nor an influencer with a large online presence. She's an engineer. Lily, despite keeping her social media accounts private and not engaging often with fans, is still very popular because the veil of mystique that surrounds her. She has fan accounts for no other reason than dating a driver. She's dragged into this world unwillingly, being praised as the standard of what a proper partner should really be, about letting her mind have all the shine and spotlight and is consistently compared to other WAGs. And despite the fact that Lily is a private woman, fans have managed to find out a lot of specifics about her, including her relatives' social media accounts, details about her relationship with Oscars, the school she attended, what brand she uses, and even her grades. Despite her choosing to not engage in WAG culture, she still has no choice but to be an unwilling participant. I said before in the video that the main target audience for WAG-related content are young women and girls, who are also part of the reason why it's highly toxic. Yes, we're gonna have that conversation, because there's plenty of emotionally and intellectually lazy women who don't want to be confronted with the roles they play in upholding the patriarchy but engaging in things that are detrimental to women's progress. They don't want to take responsibility for participating in WAG culture and harming not only other women with their internalized misogyny, but also themselves by getting into the parasocial relationships that are necessary for WAG culture to thrive, simply deeming it as fun gossip and not that deep. In this day and age, there's a lot of online spaces dedicated to WAGs. Tumblr blogs, news accounts, style accounts, fan pages, gossip accounts, Reddit snark subs, all dedicated to dissecting these women and analyzing every aspect of their lives under a microscope. These accounts can have up to hundreds of thousands of followers and even have contact with some of the WAGs themselves. I interact with a lot of sports content on Instagram. That's the way I get sports news. One downside of that is that the algorithm starts pushing content about the athlete's private life, which of course leads to this kind of slop. And don't let anyone fool you into thinking it's harmless and just for fun. These spaces are pink-wash breeding grounds for misogyny, purity culture, slut-shaming, body-shaming, classism, and even racism. And it only takes you a brief look at these pages to see what the fans value the most in a WAG: being a good and supportive partner, not doing nor saying too much, having a respectable job or college education instead of being a dumb influencer or Instagram model, dressing modestly and being classy. This crap is filled with dog whistles. It's basically trad wife propaganda. They want a woman that's submissive, is always there for her partner, willing to be a breeding mare for little future athletes, doesn't have any opinions of her own, and always stays quiet and in her proper place. It's not even subtle. If you can really see the problem with this, with a culture that reduces women to an extension of their partners, that should submit to their every whim, that praises those who stay quiet and just happily clap and cheer, I can't help you see the light. No one can. A recurring thing with this type of online spaces is the desire to see these women humble. To be fair, this is not exclusive to WAG culture. We all know the cycle female artists go through when they get too famous or enter another exposure phase. When a woman that is deemed unworthy suddenly dates an athlete that is highly desirable, the internalized misogyny hive-mind will look for any patterns that hint, you will often hear that word in WAG accounts, or prove that the sportman in question is about partner to her. And rather than attributing this to his own failures as a man, the psychos will deem it as proof that this woman is either a fake relationship for PR purposes, that she's using him for his money, or that he doesn't see her as anything serious because it then validates the wannabe WAGs as potential candidates. If she gets cheated on, it's even better for them. They want to see the bad woman embarrassed because it reaffirms their pygmalion delusions that they are good women. And that is a realization that deeply upsets me, maybe because in some ways I'm still idealistic. Most women don't actually hate the patriarchy, they hate the role they have under it. As soon as the opportunity to benefit from it arises, they'll immediately take it, disregarding everything we work so hard for and openly twerking for men and catering to their every whim and the standards that they push upon us. These women don't actually want to leave the cage, they want to stay in it, paint the cage pink, put some bows on it and relish in the wrong oppression. And this is the last point I'm going to raise in this chapter, but no matter how much people try to tell you that they admire these women for their careers, their work, their fashion, etc., it doesn't change the fact that people were initially interested in them not because of who they are, but because of what they are, which is WAGs, the side characters in the stories of men that they find desirable and have projected on. To start closing this video essay, I want to share this quote from Andrea Dworkin's 1983 book, Right-Wing Women. The right offers women a simple, fixed, predetermined social, biological, and sexual order. A woman's compliance ensures a certain amount of protection, a certain amount of security. She is rewarded for her compliance by a certain measure of safety within the male order, and she accepts this safety as the ultimate limit of her freedom. I deeply enjoyed going back to the script and reworking it to upgrade its quality. It doesn't just challenge me to sharpen my writing and my analysis, but also looking at my inner self and my ever-changing perspectives, as well as forcing me into a deep state of introspection. Because I'm not gonna lie, there is a part of me that finds the whole dating an athlete thing appealing. I do deeply love sports, after all. But beyond the spectacle, it also presented a huge question to me that goes beyond my social analysis. Would I feel happy about turning down a potentially fulfilling romantic relationship if it means my own personal brand gets to grow beyond the shadow of a man? Actually, I shouldn't be making such definitive statements on this topic because the tongue is the punishment of the body, so I'm just gonna hold it in case it comes back to haunt me in the future. But in case you're someone who wants this life for whatever reason, I can give you some recommendations as a PR professional. Don't mention him anywhere, do not post that man on your social media, do not interact with his fans, limit how people can engage with you, and maintain a low profile in public while refusing to engage with WAG culture and parasocialism. Abuse the fuck out of the blog, restrict and report functions. And most importantly, get your own back and maintain your career independent from his. Do not ever think about making a man a part of your brand. It can only attract monitoring spirits that won't let you grow as your own person. Women are beautiful, complex, and multidimensional beings. We don't have to box ourselves into what society demands of us. While I'm aware that the power of fan culture, corporations, and politics is almost impossible to escape, I want everyone who watches this video to challenge these notions and actively rebel against them. There's a lot of freedoms that we work hard for. Don't let someone take them away by packaging outdated notions with an aloe yoga set. I say this as a creator, as a woman, and as a human being who, more than watching women shine, bloom, and flourish, wants women to be completely free from feeling like they need to fit in these narrow molds in order to be accepted and deemed worthy of respect and love. This video is a part of my investigation and dives into the nuances of the issues our society faces through a critical lens. My goal with this channel is using my background in communications to provide as much information and analysis as I can for reflection and change. If you are interested in continuing these investigations into cultural and social dynamics and value research that prioritizes sociological rigor over the hot takes economy that plagues social media at the moment, I invite you to subscribe and join the archive. For further documentations, deep dive essays, articles, and some of my more personal thoughts and musings, you can find my extended work on my Substack, which I will link down below. This has been a Mimi Archive entry. Thank you for your time, and I will see you in the next video.